you. Thank you.
We'll call this meeting to order at 7:01. Budget Committee and the Council, as well as some department heads. And if you could pledge allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And just back to the Louis Stone Paul.
You can Skype in, yeah.
FaceTime. All members of the council are present. Budget Committee, Louis Anance is present and Brian Alquist is present. All others are absent. Because we have only 2 people here from the Budget Committee, their election of chair, I guess you guys will need to postpone that and at another time, and you guys can figure out how you're gonna do that with Zach.
I'll reach out with everybody and see if we can get it scheduled potentially next Thursday.
And we'll go ahead and start with you.
So for the introduction, what I really wanted to do is pull together the opportunity for the department heads and myself and Lisa to sit down and give a topographical overview of what it is we're trying to put together for all of you. And then figure out, allow the budget committee to see if you want to meet independently on your own, or if sitting in a joint session through the process is something that you are amicable to. Within the agenda and the schedule that we're looking at, today we're going to do the preliminary budget overview. Feel free to ask questions. There's no real need to make decisions or any action today. Definitely can, at least the council has a quorum to be able to do that, but I still think as more of a listening session, this can be a decent way to start the conversation. There is a potential to do the budget committee meetings extra in the off Thursday weeks if we want to. The council has already established their meetings as their next meeting will be March 7th with their final meeting on March 21st. By March 21st, we will have to have the budget committee recommendations as well as the council to set the public hearing and the warrants prepared for the April 1st deadline.
Tell them see you.
Sign in, please.
We are working backwards from a more abbreviated time frame. Using the digital balloting equipment, it moves up the requirements. We have to have the warrant articles and language finalized in place. That is putting us at that April 1st deadline to have language through to get us the 60 days we need before the June election to get the machines loaded and provide the time frame we need to be able to do absentee balancing and everything. So today was really, what I wanted was a unified presentation to both boards to be able to get the same information and then be able to not have all of these fine people sitting here collecting wages while we debate. So within the overview, I don't want to do a full recap of the presentation or essentially the forward in the conversation that I was looking to start. I'm hoping that everybody had the ability to read it and digest a little bit of it. I think the biggest takeaway in looking at really what we've all been doing, and mostly you've all been doing before me, for the past 50 years, we're looking at the sustainable growth rate within the town, and that is something that I think under the program we're putting together we're looking to maximize that growth potential and make sure that we can keep spending operational increases within the growth rate, and to make for a more sustainable operation overall. I think historically, looking at the 50-year averages, we're still doing really well. We've had a 1.8% per year decrease over the past 50 years. Many of those are coming from reevaluations, and that is going to be our target moving forward. Being able to have intentional investments and targeting the revaluation that we are on track for the next 2 to 3 years to pull the trigger on. The last revaluation, 2008, didn't provide really what we needed from evaluation. It was not a solid part in the market, and it cost us $8 million in overall valuation. What we have now going on, not just with Hannaford, but with some of the other developments we have coming in, there's stuff coming on the books that is going to have a positive impact and allow us to maintain the sustainable growth based on the increased need for services that we see from the more houses being built, the more residences coming in, and the more businesses, and the more they tax the services that we do provide. The overall process this year, I tried not to change too much. I do like to change things and abbreviate things where I think it makes sense. And for the most part, the staff has been really accommodating for my desire to change and put in some structural modifications. We'll see if the council and the budget committee like the same ones as well. Overall, what we were going for is more of a clarity, that we can actually show what the cost of services that we're providing, and then it's more open and it's more transparent. When I presented to the department heads and really asked them for their input for what they wanted, I wanted to change the process and approach a little bit more. Instead of them self-censoring and self-regulating, what I really wanted to encourage is them to tell us what it is, if these are the services that we provide, what is it going to cost to provide services the best that we can, and then let's take it to the council, the budget committee, and myself, and bring those back into something that's a little bit more palatable, and not have them self-censor, not have them self-regulate. I don't want to say priorities. What I don't want is I don't want them to feel the need to not put forward the needs that we have. I don't want expired equipment on firefighters or expired vests on police officers. I want to make sure that we have a process in place that's going to address them. Many of this, especially when it comes to the capital improvement plan, they're not included in this budget. We're taking a much longer approach. We have put together, the council's established a public safety advisory committee, which is moving forward. We've had a preliminary meeting, and we're really going to spend the next 12 months working on a longer range plan for those assets. Itemizing, in the back of your book, you have the fold out 7-year projection sheets for the CIP. Something that we're going to start taking as a tool to break down all of the large scale assets we have, their lifespans, their expectancies, the maintenance required to maintain them, as well as putting money away to replace them. And it's also a way for us to control our priorities. That is going to be a longer process that I didn't want to rush through this. And that with the action of that committee, we're going to be able to put the next 12 months into, I think, good use, making sure that we can get all of those assets tracked, as well as a plan in place to fund them in a way that isn't going to be based on borrowing in order to spend. Budget committee as well, that is one thing that I would love if we can get up to the forum. The PSAC would really like to have a budget committee member as well. We've got members from police, fire, rescue, myself and the council, planning board members. We're still working on a development committee member and a budget committee member to be part of that year-long process to really look at the budgetary impacts of assessing all of the assets that we have and what their replacement life cycles are going to look like. On your table when you came in to add to your book, there are updates. There is the year-to-date report. There is revenue and expenses. We are at 63% of the year. So if you're looking at percentages and trying to figure out where we are, how we're doing compared to the budget or compared to the previous years, we can use that a little bit more. So revenues and expenses, it's still something I like to have on hand when we're digging through the budget to see how we're actually trending on the more direct, the more myopic approach to instead of looking at the 50-year averages. Also, since we completed the budget packet, I've been working with the business manager at the RSU. We had initially stuck a plug number in the mill rate calculation sheet. To jump on the mill rate calculation sheet, these are based on a few limited assumptions. The assumptions are on the assumption page directly before it. A large one that was kind of concerning was the increase given the expansion at the middle school. The initial number we got was about a $74,000 increase based on the debt for our portion out of the 3 towns. So the number that was originally plugged in there was the existing debt service, or the existing number that we provided last year to the school system, plus our share of the debt service. They have received more funding than they're anticipating, and we were able to knock about $68,000 off from what they are anticipating asking the voters to support by the time we get their budget through. Their net increase right now is it's under $4,000 over last year's contribution. So if they can maintain that process within their budget, our overlay at the bottom of that mill rate calculation sheet is going to give us a little bit more breathing room. So the budget summary. Budget summary worksheet, page number 1. You'll see that there are 7 blacked out articles. As part of trying to consolidate it, provide less ambiguous articles to the voters, as well as being able to break out expenses in a way that they're more transparent, and it's easier for budget committee, council, and voters to see and understand why it costs what it costs to provide the services we provide. I've eliminated and relocated practically those 7 are going away, and we've moved around some expense lines in others. Legal services was a very small article that is actually now incorporated between planning and code enforcement and the administration office. We're really the only ones utilizing the legal account. Municipal complex was really the impetus behind some of the changes. What's historically been included in the municipal budget is the aggregate of all of our utilities, regardless of what building it's in, what department it services, and it's really a catch-all that doesn't actually clearly represent what it is, let alone the connotation of the municipal complex itself, and what on its face it looks like that may represent. Especially with the new building and the issues going on there, or this facility. It doesn't include everything from that. It even includes utilities from transfer station, from all of our services. So when you get to that line, I've left those in there so you can see what last year's numbers were, and you can see where they were relocated to. What I didn't want to do at the same time is lose the ability to understand what is the aggregate total when it comes to diesel fuel or when it comes to heating fuel. So the blue page behind page number 4 does not carry over onto the budget summary page, but it's an equated total of those allocated expenses. So if we do want to look at what we're paying for heating fuel, what we're paying CMP for all of our utilities, we can see that. But when I got down to the line items and departments, I really wanted it to represent who's using that electricity, who's using that water service, so that it's more direct impact when it comes to the expenses that we're asking the taxpayers to foot. Are there any questions about that process, reasoning, what was included, what wasn't included? You can chime in anytime. I don't want to talk all night. Okay. There is water, coffee. The Keurig is on its last legs, but it works. So, staff.
All right, I'll try.
Yes, sir.
I know from your point of view, you think that the way you're doing it is more transparent. And I spent a long time looking at this budget, and I just didn't feel that way. Because you're putting money under departments for the cloud and CMP and propane and oil. I think people like to see municipal complex, 20 grand for CMP, 32,000 for oil, 40 grand for insurance, 52,000 for FICA. And I think the people that come to look at and vote that day will find that transparent. That's my opinion. And I guess the way I read this is that your proposal is to spend $195,770 more than last year. Forget the revenue, don't care about that right now. And it seems, in all the years, the 25 years I've been on the council, I've never seen any kind of an amount like that. You know you gotta pay if you're gonna give a raise, and you know you gotta pay extra FICA, and if insurance goes up 6% or 7%, you gotta pay that. That's stuff that I can deal with, because you gotta pay it. But I just, 195,000, and we're taking in 161,348 in more revenue than last year. And that number just to me says, why can't this come down so that instead of keeping the tax rate the same and going up 5 cents, why can't we really knock the tax rate down with 161,000 extra if we spent half of it, 80 grand if we did. I don't even want to do that, but if we did, that's $500,000 in this town, or close to it. And all of a sudden, instead of being, what is it now, 2185, 35?
2180.
2180? Wouldn't it be great to be 20-something if we could make that happen? I mean, this is a big concern to people in this town, to pay property tax. I hear it all the time. Maybe the people that don't pay property tax, it's not a big concern. But for the people that do pay property tax, it's a really big concern in this town. And when I saw the couple $100,000, because how much was it last year, the budget? 780 from the town side, not the school, the town side.
So the expenses was 2.5.
Right, but how much was the school?
1.6.
Yeah, 1.6.
So $900,000, give or take. Round off. So we're pushing to spend 1.1 million. If you add 195,000 to 900,000, it's awful close, 1.1 million. Or am I wrong in how I see this? Is there another explanation that I'm missing?
I don't understand the school process. To the earlier point, I agree. The goal is to find a way to pull the mill rate down. And I think in the intro, using the data that we have for the last 50 years, that mill rate has come down substantially, and it comes down through the revaluation process. We pull that revaluation off, and we've had, in some points, a $40 per mill reduction. That's where the big results happen. What I don't want to do is think that we can grow the operation of the town. When we bring in new businesses, we're bringing in Hannaford, we're bringing in some of these higher services businesses, they expect more services, and we are required to provide more services because of that. We have more residents coming in, we have more rescue calls, we have more people on our roads. It is stuff that we can't think that we can maintain a budget that doesn't grow every year at the same time that we're putting more and more stress on the system. Deferred maintenance is my biggest fear, and I've been really clear with the staff that I need to know if something's gonna break. We had a hot water heater literally shorting out the other day. It's a deferred maintenance issue because we're not maintaining the assets we need to, because the philosophy and the approach has been to nickel and dime it instead of work it from the investment point of view. I want the mill rate to go down too, but we're not gonna do it unless we actually invest in the facilities and then do it on the valuation process. And that's only a benefit to the taxpayer. Their property values go up. Providing 24-hour police service in a town makes your home worth more. that's what helps the taxpayer's personal net worth grow up. That is their asset that they're cultivating. It is still, for me, the investment thought process. If you want your house to grow, you want your personal net worth to grow, you invest, you paint your shutters, you add another bathroom to your house before you pull the trigger on an appraisal. And that's the way that I believe that we're going to get the mill rate down, by utilizing that process to more fairly distribute the burden that we do have. In that same process, there are tools out there to insulate and assist people who do have trouble paying their fair share. And from the bills that we have in front of the legislature, it's getting better for us when it comes to helping us cover what we're providing for homestead exemptions, for the senior real estate tax credit program is coming back and they're putting more money into it. Those tools are there to help people insulated that can, but the people who can afford it and the businesses that are coming in, they're coming in demanding more services. It's gonna cost more for us to provide those services. And I don't wanna operate under the assumption that we're gonna cut our way out of it. I want to keep our growth smaller than I wanna keep our expenses growing smaller than our valuation.
I didn't even go down the road of cutting our way out of it. I mean, 200 grand
Okay,
or
but-
900 grand, what's that percentage?
But what we're looking at is
26,
not
28%?
the mill rate anticipation. You're still looking at a reduction within this budget. So it's within what we have on hand and it's within the growth that we have in front of us.
That's only because we took in revenue from like a Hannaford and the new houses that were built in town.
And they have extra services that we have to provide to them.
Hannaford?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have a full-time police department that does a very good job. We have a full-time, and we have a fire department that does a very good job. What other services do we do for Hannaford? I'm really curious. That would cost the taxpayer money to do a service for them, because I just, maybe there is some stuff, but I just, 200 grand just seems crazy to me. If we had met, us, well, anybody else here, I would have tried to convince these people to tell you, go back, do these numbers and come in with a real number, like
This is,
$60,000, $80,000.
this is the process and this is our ability to do that. You all have the ability to make your recommendations and I have no intention that this number is gonna be able to stay the same. I think the whole point was to have the opportunity to have you, as a council, have your input on where our value, the priorities we're putting our dollars go. The same thing with the budget committee. They get the same process and they get the ability to look at the same numbers and have their input as well.
Yep. And I'm gonna tell you right now, from my 25 years, when the people see $384,681 for our full-time police department from $313,000, they are going to go berserk. That has been a problem in this town. We've fought it off, and people have come in and it said, blah, 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 and I'm like, 300 grand is not a bad number. It's not a bad number to have a full-time police department around 300 grand, and I've always stuck up for it. But when it pushes $400,000, people, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe people aren't gonna be like that, but the people I know are gonna be like that.
So can I ask to clarify, is the concern that you didn't want me to be able to show the actual number for the police force because you didn't like the allocation process? Or that you don't like it that it's the larger number and that you're looking at the real number for it now?
Well, I have to look at it, but some of the stuff, I'm like, why do you want to put it there? It's always been, the town taxpayers pay whatever, comes up, whatever it is. And it's always been a line item. So payroll service, $4,800, okay? They're employees of the town.
It costs us $200 per head to provide
I'm
payroll.
not disputing the number, but if it's a one-line number for $63,000, that's payroll
If
service.
we had less employees, that number would be lower. The more employees an individual department has, the more that expense is. So it's growing over here based on how many employees we have over here. If we cannot correlate it, then we don't understand how much it costs to provide a service.
Well, I get it, I get what you're saying. But annual maintenance and inspection of the boiler, you gotta heat the building, and we have a police department in the building. So do I have to look around to find where you put annual maintenance inspection of boilers and figure out which department you charged a prorated amount to?
If it's under the allocation tab, then you will be able to see the summary of it. But if it's a department that is contained within an entire building itself, then it's not worth prorating because it all falls under that.
Propane, $3,000 for heating oil. You gotta heat the building, it's owned by the taxpayers. I'm just giving you my insight on it, that I know what's gonna happen
And I
when
appreciate it.
people see 400 grand for the police department and X amount here and X amount there, I know what's gonna happen. They're gonna be screaming.
So when we get to that process, if we can talk about the value that they provide to it, that's the communication that I think all of us need to actually take out. If we're providing these services, if we walk out and tell the taxpayer that we believe we're screwing you, I'm sorry, that's it, there's nothing we can do, then that's what they're gonna think. If we go out and tell them that, I believe we're providing a really good service, especially compared to the neighboring communities, and that has a positive impact on your home value, that has a positive impact on your quality of life and your ability to feel secure in your home, I think that's another conversation. They believe half of it, at least based on the way that we provide them that information. If we go out with a negative attitude, that's gonna be what they get. That's gonna be what they absorb.
Who's talking about negative attitudes? I like the police department, I like the fire department. I don't have a negative attitude towards them. I don't see it as transparent as you do.
Yes, sir.
Can I add something? I think that, I think you may be missing the point that,
Oh.
and hear me out.
Yeah.
The amount of money that we pay for the police department,
Yeah.
what you're looking in there now is gonna find everything that, from soup to nuts, that hasn't been in there for the police department. It was off in another line item that we spent so much for fuel oil and, all those items, in order to heat the building, they've taken, part of their price is in that department.
This isn't a business where you're charging so much per hour and you're getting money and now you allocate that. This is taxpayers. It's not a business.
But I think this is what the difference is.
Why don't we run it like a business?
So-
Why don't we show the actual,
Cost of everything.
yeah.
The police, how do you, I kind of agree with both of them, but how do you put the annual sprinkler system under the police department?
There's a portion of it, and because this is a transition budget, and because within this budget, it anticipates us having the other operation, I've not stuck them with all of the building costs. And we are gonna have to downsize it, but we are seeing new efficiencies within the other departments going to be more efficient building. For the interim, this building is this building. We move them downstairs, we find a way to shut off the upstairs and reduce the cost here. But that's part of what the PSAC is gonna be looking at as well, is where do they go, what facilities are we looking at that can get them into a more efficient operation as well.
So,
And it's prorated between all three, it's not.
oh,
just
you
police
prorated, I
department.
saw you prorated everything, yes. And you took in square footage probably, I get it. So, does raising the budget from 900,000 to
Well, I don't know.
1 million, does that bother you?
This isn't the final budget,
I didn't say that.
no, but I would like to see, I don't want to see the taxes go up a great deal, but like, you're gonna have to go up a certain amount every year. Whether they come up with that, that's another question.
Can I ask where you're pulling that 900 to the 1 point?
Oh. got,
What we're looking
I
at.
got 2.733,
Yes.
so that's 195,770 plus. And I asked you what the school was. Out of that. Out of that 2.537381, I asked you what the school was.
Yeah, so the school's not on this page. Education doesn't come in until the mill rate calculation sheet. So this is our operation. So we're looking, as presented, where we haven't started going through it yet, we're looking at 2.5 to 2.7 in change.
I thought you just said the school was like 1 point something.
The school, 1.66.
But they're not in.
They're not part
I
of our
know
budget.
that.
They come in.
So
now.
are you telling me that the town of Mechanic Falls budget percentage on the taxes, the town is twice as much as the school? So we're 66% for the town, 2.57 million, and only 1.1 million is for the school? I always thought it was reversed. I thought the school always, tax dollars went more to the school than it did to the town. Has that changed?
When you set the rate last year, the number you were using was, that's not my updated number. $1,662,793, and that includes the additional $4.
So that means the town spends a lot more money than we give to the school out of tax dollars. So on my tax bill, the percentage is gonna be, the school is a lot less than the town. Okay, I guess I better go back and look at it, because I was always thought that it was the other way around, that the school was the majority, was the better number, bigger number of the tax bill than the town. I didn't realize we spent 2.7 million on this town. I'm out of touch, I guess.
Anyone else have any thoughts, comments before we jump into departments?
This is minor, but I noticed you're getting rid of your legal costs. You're using Maine Municipal Association totally on
It's an allocated expense,
it's somewhere else.
yes. It's administration and planning board, well, code enforcement. The more that we look at revisiting our land use code, marijuana policies we're working on, we're running more through them. And actually, it's not an increase in the legal budget at all this year. Because
So-
we are using them in May.
In the warrants that we all signed for the bills from July 5th or July 1st to date, if it says Lenore, Schultz, and Weber, is that our legal budget?
The only reason it wouldn't be is if it is involving the new building. So that wouldn't fall against our legal budget, that falls against the legal budget of the project cost.
Okay, that makes sense, because I added them up.
And that's where.
And there, it's over, it's 4,800, which spent on legal. But under real legal, you spent 87%, we have $500 left in that budget for 4.5 months.
Anybody, we good to move? Before we pull in any of the department heads, basic assumptions, on the revenue side of it, there are only 3 places that had notable changes. The biggest one is the auto excise tax. Last year, we were still budgeting about 410. You can see from the trends as well as our year-to-date numbers that we are trending much higher than we've been traditionally budgeting for. A lot of that is providing some of the additional funds on hand that we've been using the past couple of years to bring down expenses. The other 2 is the money from the reserve accounts. There is a portion being utilized from reserve accounts that is going directly towards the interest payments on the new service. So we're using the reserve accounts that were established last year through the process. was 40,000-ish put into a reserve account for future debt service. We're using that to pay for the debt service on the new building. And the third one is the revenue sharing anticipation. We took the conservative shot at the 0.5% increase, not the 5% that everybody has been talking about. It's not a realistic number. I think the one that we have is a realistic number.
So this increase is a low increase, you're saying, is a low estimate of what the increase is gonna be
For
on
Revenue
revenue
share.
share?
the 0.5% is what is built in. There's a couple bills asking for the 5%. I would not be naive
Yeah.
to think that we would get a 5% revenue share. The 0.5% is still part of the budget process. It's still a fight. It is one of the three that our governor has decided to make their priority. And the other thing that MMA and through our legal advocacy boards are really fighting for is the homestead exemption, getting that up to 100%. And some of them, there are at least half a dozen bills going forward, some of them knocking homestead up to $45,000, $50,000 with a 100% contribution. I don't think we're gonna get all of that either. If we can raise it some, it'll have an impact, but none of that has been budgeted in homestead. We're anticipating it with what we have now, which is 62.5 on 20,000. Anybody? Good.
Excuse me, I did have a question
Yes,
on
ma'am.
your overview. You had mentioned that there are some numerous opportunities on the horizon to help offset the impact of these investments to the town. You mentioned the new construction of approximately 15,000 square feet of retail space at 5 Corners and completion of new hotel and restaurant downtown. What's the timeline for those? Are they going to be done this year, or what are we looking at? Are these future, or is this more imminent as far as being able to help in terms of additional revenues?
The additional revenues in those examples are not included in these assumptions. So
Okay.
the assumption in the revenue we're looking at is what we have from working with the assessor based on Hannaford per se. We've, last year was budgeted at 20% of their total value. They're now complete. April 1st, we'll be getting the 100% of their anticipated $5.25 million. So that's gonna be a dramatic increase, approximately an extra $100,000 there alone. That's not including their personal property tax either. Still trying to remain conservative as always on revenues. Those new projects, 5 Corners, they're really beginning the process with planning board now. Their goal is to break ground this year. They're not gonna have anything built to the extent that it's going to affect us next budget year, within this budget that we're looking at now as a proposal, but it would be for the year after. So the sustainable growth is coming to reference it there. It's not what we're utilizing to calculate revenue in this budget.
Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
And the hotel,
We're going to have it open July 1st, but April 1st will be the cutoff for
Right.
evaluation,
so they've already gone through planning board. I believe that it went well last night. So they're pretty excited, 16-room hotel downtown. And then they've got future growth plans. So they're already started the planning board process. Again, they're gonna miss our first cutoff this year, but they'll be included on next year. Allocated expenses, there's a couple of things I wanted to cover quick before we jump into this. There are things that we're working on now to alleviate some of these expenses as well. Efficiencies within the buildings, part of the relocation process we save on utilities. Today, spent a decent amount of time trying to weasel our way out of our First Light contract. Our internet is ungodly expensive, and we are in the First Light contract for at least another year and a half, I believe. So we're trying to find the cost-effective way to get out. Quotes we're getting from Spectrum now would save us $2,000 to $4,000 a year on internet and phone systems altogether. So right now, you're looking at our total phone system is $13,000. It's 11.5, 12-ish going up based on the relocation and splitting it based on the broadband service and everything else that we're receiving. I think that's a lot of money to be paying for internet, especially given our usage. Again, we're budgeting for the whole thing. If I can't get us out of this contract, we're in it for another year and a half.
So how much is it a year? It's $13,000 a year through this company, and how much is Spectrum?
Spectrum, if we can get into it, we're looking at least a $2,000 a year savings. And that's, 2 locations, 18 phone lines, voice over IP. It's
And is there
really,
other options?
outside of Spectrum and Firesight, there's not a lot of other options. We were with Oxford when we signed that contract, and that's what, when they got bought out, dropped it from Firesight. Boards and council, there's only a couple of changes within that. What I was looking to do is the donations that we were putting out, ATV, snowmobile, community day, that those felt and operated more like donations from the town or from the council, so I've relocated those there. They weren't funds that were originally placed within recreation, but it wasn't a recreation budget. That department, that committee had no jurisdiction, say, overview over those funds, and they were actually funds going to a third party. It felt more logical to put it as a gift or donation. Didn't fit under where they normally go within social services, because it's not a social service donation. No questions, no comments? Legal services was addressed, municipal complex, we will probably address again. First department, town clerk, elections clerk. Basic changes within that. I've removed the finance director from the clerk budget line. Part of the operation, I still think budget needs to follow form and function, and part of that is taking the finance director out of the individual department and putting them in the operations budget, town manager / administration budget with myself. Our function within the town is more of an oversight and assistance to all departments as an aggregate. So part of that process is removing that, I don't want to say, burden of salary from one department, so that it spends time assisting all of them, that we moved it more to a general administration line. So that is the basis for the reduction.
Who's the part-time deputy town clerk?
That is a potential new,
A new hire?
it is a potential new hire. So part of the, and some of these overlap, it's coming up in this scenario with the services that we've been providing as a, what's the actual title? Safety officer?
Safety compliance.
The safety compliance officer was a stipend or an additional position that our code enforcement officer was filling. With the workload and what we have going on with the growth and the process within the planning office, we've been very upfront that it's a challenge to be able to keep up with the growth and the developers that we're spending our time working with now, as well as fulfilling that compliance safety officer role. So the thought process is we're utilizing the safety officer, whose primary function came in 2013-ish, to work within the town to keep an eye on, investigate, and mitigate insurance claims, accidents claims, and lawsuits. So this position has had a positive impact on our ability to keep our premiums down, continue to lower our premiums. Our general liability is going down again in this budget, based on some of the work that this position does do. It keeps on track of a lot of the record keeping and oversight to make sure all of our elevators, our facilities have the required annual or monthly log checks done. Runs the safety committee meeting, which decompresses when it comes to fire, water, public works, police, if there are any incidences, to work on what we can do to mitigate risks in the future. Am I missing anything for what you've done?
You covered it well.
Thank you. So being able to utilize that, to come back to the first point, is relocating that $8-ish thousand that that stipend position was within the clerk's budget allows us to cover more of the entry-level front window clerk work more cost effectively at a $13, $14 an hour rate, as opposed to clerk rate or tax clerk rate, which is more of a trained skill set certification that these people have that allow them to do more. So in order to have them cover what we were doing, we're still seeing a net increase by having the clerks do it, freeing up more of the clerical work on the lower end, and seeing a net gain by relocating this within the clerk's operation. Do you want to go over anything else within your budget or the CIP items? Because there's one that we get to address. Elections.
Which is in the.
It's in the major CIP. So if we want to jump to the folded pages in the back is our major CIP, minor CIP, small, $1,000-ish, larger CIP items go on the larger CIP plan. So in the second one is going to be the town clerk.
So the election division is contracted with ES&S right now for the machines that we currently use for elections. And their contract is up this month, next month, somewhere in here. And they are going out to bid for new equipment that each town will have to then purchase or lease, which will replace the equipment we have now. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room for us. It's just gonna be whether or not we choose to purchase, lease, and whether we are going to have one machine or two machines going forward. The information that is in here is what it costs for the current machines if we're getting something similar. But the state basically sent down a heads up and said, okay, we're gonna be negotiating, we're gonna be accepting bids, but we have no idea. We know you're all coming up on budget. We can't give you any figures. So that is the best figure that I can come up with by using the figures for the current machines.
So the 15,000,
The 14, election equipment is 14,000. The other is for a new town seal. The town seal that we have is very dated, it's kind of hard to use. It's locked in a drawer and we tug it out every time we need it. This one would be a new one that would remain on the counter and has a key to lock it, so we would have a key, each of us, and nobody could come in and use it when we're not here because that key needs to be in there and turned to operate it. And then as far as digitalizing vital records, we started to look into that. A lot of our records, our vital records, our records downstairs, really need to be placed in another form of media. The records downstairs, some of them are in very poor condition, and we're not really spending any money to preserve them. I contacted a company that I met at the convention, the Maine Municipal Association convention, and asked for a quote. They came in, went down to the vault downstairs, looked at everything that we needed, and that was probably 10 to 12 months ago. And the only thing I keep getting from them is that it's going to be astronomical, and they don't want to give me a figure. They're trying to work with the Vital Records Division at the state level to allow us to digitalize the records and not have to also put them on microfiche. Right now, that is the only acceptable digital record through the Vital Records Division is a microfiche. And so they are trying to change the law to allow it
So we can just scan documents basically and keep them that way digital rather than also have them microfiche. So that's probably gonna be something that's, you know, gonna come in future budget years. But just a heads up that we are gonna probably wanna do something. We've got some pretty bad records downstairs.
Some of the problems that we have with maintaining these, I mean, it's a state requirement to maintain them. When it comes to scanning and digitizing them, the remediation process on some of that is really where they can't come in, they won't come in with their equipment, sit here and or bring it to their facilities or do it because they're concerned with contamination, mold, everything else that's on some of those trucks, that they won't bring them to their regular facility, so it knocks us up to another scenario. Still trying to find ways around it. I'm rather hopeful that if we can push a little bit harder and we can get the state requirement for microfilm to be realized that it's antiquated. I mean, we can do mortgages with digital signatures on PDFs, and it's a secure process. I don't know why we can't digitize and store permanent records that way. Any questions in general on the clerks? Hearing none, we can jump to easy one, administration. The only change in the administration is removing the salary and related expenses for training and proration from the clerk's budget for the finance director position and putting it in the administration line. Everything else is exactly the same. The second tab in the back is the administration CIP. We are keeping the building reserve that we have there. And it is looking to be a reduction on the building. Part of working with PSAC is figuring out the investments needed in this building. There are needed investments in this building, but we're looking at lifespan, expectancy, et cetera. Things that have come up this year that we've started talking about outside of the plumbing issues in the building. We squeaked by on our fire alarm system, and its motherboard in the basement, it failed, but we were able to get it to work in order to pass inspection. And then we have other service-related stuff on the sprinkler system itself that we have to keep up with that line. The evaluation is the only other thing. We're running a starting balance of $75,000. Looking towards 3-4 year horizon for a full reevaluation, or at least a drive-by reevaluation. We're going to be in the ballpark of $150,000, $120,000. We're looking at it being about a 10-year cycle, which is probably ideal. It's not overly burdensome. If we get anywhere beyond 15-year cycle on a revaluation, at some point the assessors won't work with us, and it leaves us not a functional situation. Any questions on admin, CIP? Who's next? Safety compliance officer, as we spoke of earlier, that's been transferred to the clerk's budget within this proposal. And all those related expenses, there is a savings too with the training and travel. We've merged with the existing training and travel budget. Utilities. You can cover more utilities on the water department.
Where the utilities that have been allocated to the different departments were utilities that were like for the toilets and the electricities for this building and stuff. We have some electric expenses like for street lights. You're gonna find those still in this utilities budget. The catch basins for the sanitary district and the fire hydrants from the water department. Those all stay here in the utilities budget because they can't really be allocated to different departments. They're just kind of a town-wide thing. We did add to this budget, the annual elevator maintenance, mostly because we really didn't have another good place to put it.
Questions on utilities? You're up.
What would you like to know?
You wanna jump up and take a seat?
Come over
Changes
here.
to planning. Everybody knows Fred, our code enforcement officer?
I think everybody knows me. What would you like to know?
So, basic changes in what we're looking at within this process. Coming out of the mill fire, we were able to identify, especially when they're asking us for records, things that we weren't able to provide during the investigation, during the firefighting too, when they're coming to us asking for a floor plan, a layout, what's where. Those are things that we've traditionally not had. And it's not just not being able to digitize and access it. And many of these things that have happened before any of us were here, it was not part of the process to get a floor plan, to get, and to have it be accessible and utilized in any way. So coming out of the mill fire experience, what we've been trying to do is spend more time integrating, not just planning to have more detailed, more digitized records instead of our paper files, so that when it comes to it, we can pull this stuff, we can access it when we're sitting on the side of the road in the middle of a rainstorm at a situation, but also integrate their services and their inspections with the fire department when it comes to life safety, access, ingress, egress, to make sure that we can utilize these records in a way that's more effective. Other changes and actually increase in volume that we've been seeing for calls and for the amount of time that we've even spent together working with developers on concept plans around Five Corners, around some other buildings, and also working through some of this policy. Right now it's the marijuana policy, it's the opt-in land use languages, and then the revisions that we'd like to see moving forward when it comes to modernizing our land use codes, our building codes. And really making sure we can start removing some of the inconsistencies or contradictions that are within them. When we've compiled them over the years, having outside services come in and do that code reassessment process, they're looking at $15,000 over 2 years to be able to get someone to come in and do that. I don't think that's effective. I think we can start working through the process ourselves between planning board, between our code officer and myself as well, to start taking new looks at zoning and land use as we move forward. The added benefit, I mean, some of these plans we are getting in front of us are larger, or they're more unique, and they spend a lot more time. Other things that unfortunately we are still doing out of this department as well is some of the health officer operation when it comes to complaints, concerns on people's living conditions, when it comes to not foreclosing, condemning buildings, and dealing with residents or building owner tenants. We've had, I don't know if it's more of an increase, but we've had 2 to 3 in the past couple of months alone. And these are situations that he's involved in, he's posting the door, he's working with the tenants or the landowners and working more in a social welfare process, but it results from reports, from concerns on living conditions that are based on acceptable habitation. I was trying to say that nicely.
For my department, I'm required to keep all records for 7 years. Some papers need to be lifetime. What I done a little over a year ago is do my own digitizing by putting every permit that comes through my office now is being scanned and going into a map and lot. The map and lot does not change. So it's been a process, slow process, and there's a lot of paperwork that's in these file cabinets that are outdated that we really don't need. So as every permit that comes through and goes into its own map and lot, and that will be digitized, so hopefully someday it'll be all done.
And there's nothing on the CIP side. Questions, comments, concerns about the anecdotes?
Next.
Next.
Come sit with me, Nancy. Okay. This is Nancy, everybody.
Basic changes in the library, allocated expenses, and this is another one that was also hit by the minimum wage increase. Yes, for the library. Minimum wage, so this year, we are moving from $11 to $12 for minimum wage. The only place that you will not see that is elections clerks, because that effect is not going to happen until January 1st, so we have the holiday pay issue, so that's.
Well,
all.
no, it's still, it will affect them for next June,
Any questions on my budget? Not really. Just, I don't.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is this communications part of the,
Their phones are integrated into our phone system. But she does have her own internet.
that's why I can't get into the town with my iPad.
Oh. Can you get into the library with your iPad?
Well, something is kicking me out. I don't know whether it's the library or what. So I have to come down here to read it. No.
Still working
So no other questions? Okay.
Good job. All right, thanks for visiting.
Thank you.
Switch to the
Recreation.
recreation.
Please.
So, this is a little longer conversation. So, to start from the beginning, previous year's audit, it was mentioned that there may be triggers based on the amount of money flowing through the recreation accounts as well as what they were holding. And it was mentioned in a previous year's audit. The audit that we went through when I first came on last fall, it was a trigger point, and we do have no findings. What we were able to get through the audit process is under the assumption that it's bringing their operations more in line with the expectations that haven't previously been held to the Recreation Committee itself. They've been in some of the bylaws within their operational outlines within the charter, but precedent wasn't there for it. The corrective action that we've identified working with the auditor as well is a warrant article that we're working on for language that will establish the Recreation Committee, the funds that they generate and raise through their operation, as a special revenue account that's a non-lapsing special revenue account. It's a question that does have to go before the whole town this year in June to be able to allow the establishment of that account. So what that is the same process that the water department goes through with the fees that they collect, that at the end of the year, what's not expended, it will not fall back to the general fund at the end of the year. It stays in their account for their operation. So it's kind of like either a for-profit enterprise that some nonprofits utilize, special revenue fund, and a non-lapsing special revenue fund for this account allows that to happen. That only applies to their operational funds. So the operational budget and the process that we have in place that we've been working on over the past few months is, again, similar to the water department. They will have their own operational budget. The approval process is the council to be able to see and approve their annual operational budget, allowing me in the finance department to authorize the funds based on that approved budget. It's separate from what we have here. So in front of us is, the difference is it's tax appropriated funds. The reason and what we're establishing on the other side is the non-lapsing revenue funds are self-generated funds through operations. So that's where they allow us to draw that distinction. The portion that goes between the budget committee, the council, and the voters is anything that's coming from tax appropriated funding. It's a different methodology to move it forward. That has put us into the scenario of what we've been doing in the past couple of years. The clerk's budget has been managing the books and assisting in the administration side of some of the committee work. In order to increase their efficacy, we're looking to grow that to the extent that there are other programs that we do want to add that aren't currently included. There's a seniors programming that we're working through our efforts with AARP to become a certified age-friendly community, and some of these other programs within Community Day and the Santa for the Kids program. These are programs that have been currently funded and staffed through the clerk's budget. In order to maintain some of their workload, we're trying to free it up and provide a better overall structure within recreation. Most recent change is the summer recreation program, which operated similarly and originally came out of the rec when it was founded, but their operations are town administered operations. They have, their budget was approved last month by the council, but their staff, none of their staff is returning this summer. In order to keep the summer rec program going, Recreation Committee, and through this process, we're looking to not just rehire under the same format, but hybridize it with the committee itself, allowing for the recreation position that was budgeted for last year to work in that bridge, to pick up the funding that we used to utilize out of the clerk's budget. It was about $4,000 a year in just accounting and bookkeeping services. This position will be able to do that service, as well as administer some of the other hiccups we have when it comes to managing the financial compliance that we have to hit. Some of these are cash flow management, cash handling, and following the town purchasing policy. Portion of some of the difficulties with integrating it with what recreation does and where the needs are is after business hours and it's weekends. It's paying them, it's having someone there to actually pay umpires and have the authority to pay umpires, write checks, and handle the cash management policy that is a newer imposition to provide the required government oversight from the attorneys and from the auditor's points of view. It is cash coming and going, and it's the same level of expectation that they want to have on all of these. There's always the understanding that tagging, candy bar sales, I mean, these are kids doing fundraisers. It's difficult to have that same cash management that we have to do when we're running the cash drawers here. Two-party count out and verifications. Not all of that is the same expectation, and the auditors are well aware, especially working within other towns that are going through some of the same problems that we have, is how do you take an operation, for the most part, run by volunteers off hours and integrate it with the same financial oversight requirements that we have as a government entity. Part of this process is having someone available, and again, at a lower rate than the clerk or other people in the clerk's office who've been doing that work, being able to get more out of it, and being able to, I don't want to say do it better, but have someone who's focusing on that and working specifically with the committee and with myself to manage these programs. I know the funding was there within the last budget. We have not filled the recreation position, though we're close and intend to start interviewing. portions of that, there were a few reasons why we didn't fund it, given the funds that we had. We had spent a decent amount of time waiting for the actual structure to understand the requirements that we were going to have to follow when it comes to cash management from the auditor's point of view. We're still scheduling the draft audit presentation, but we have enough of their understanding and the language coming out of the audit and their expectation to have the warrants pulled together and know what we can do to make sure that we're hitting the minimum level of requirements financially that we have to have. And another reason, to be honest, that position wasn't immediately filled was the added expense, the unexpected expense of the mill fire. Initial estimates of that was closer to a $45,000-$50,000 fire to fight. Thankfully, a lot of the equipment that we had to bring in was free of charge. It turned out to be a little over $15,000, and not knowing where we were going to be in the budget at that point, the easiest place to save money was not going to be on salt and sand this year. It was going to be on an unfilled position. So holding off on filling that position has given us a little bit of room in the breathing room within the budget to not worry about going over. Because the one thing we want to make sure we're not going to do is go over 1 penny over the approved amount. Going back to the voters is not something that we're ever going to have to do. And making sure that we had that extra breathing room, this was part of the sacrifice that we made at that time to make sure that that was not going to be a concern. I think we're doing well within the budget now. Fire budget itself is doing well year to date. We haven't had any other travesties or large expensive fires to fight. So I think we can speak it through, especially with the remainder of what's in that year's budget. The intention to move forward with it in this year's budget as well is that we're looking to establish it and move these programs forward.
All you.
So on this, there's actually nothing in there that is operation work. This does come from the town, and the $2,500 that has typically been, provided by the town to help offset some facility or operation costs is not in here. So the other part of potentially why the position wasn't filled is because there hasn't been a clear list of expectations of what that is. The way that you're stating it now too about like the coordinator position, are you, how are you going to track their hours? Are you having them, you have another position that'll be a regular clerk position. Is that the same person that you're thinking is going to be handling both? Because earlier in the meeting you had asked about a part-time position that was going to be coming up. Is this going to be the same person?
I have no assumption that would be the same person. It wasn't advertised, and I think the different skill sets.
Okay. Just wanted to make that clear. And then, how they're going to, integrate with the committee and the other programs, because as they currently sit, we're in different departments. We're still working on the overview of what each person's role is and how we're going to be doing that. We have a budget for the council to review next week. We have that here. There's nothing in here though that actually involves any of our programming. So, we in some ways look forward to having somebody potentially help us out. One thing you mentioned though, that we are all volunteer, that's accurate. As far as like the requirements for, cash out and handling, there are no current standard operating procedures. So, there's always the opportunity too to have those types of without having to, add 15,000 more to the budget. Would those tasks, if they're outlined correctly, be appropriate for us to handle? There's also been other things that we can do in the interim to manage the budget. We propose that as well. So we've had a lot of conversations about this over the last year. What are you looking for me for here? Like I guess that's the
Not so much in this scenario, and I think the hardest part for us working with the legal and the auditing side is the approval and the administration process. Because within what we've been doing, it's following the town purchasing policy, which is one of the assumptions that as government funds, we do follow the town purchasing policy. It is more cumbersome, and then they've been great with recognizing that it's gonna make it harder on the recreation committee and the volunteers to get their process to be ready, to have checks ready for umpires, to make sure that things are run when we have to run them on our time frame, and with the pace that we have to do it, or we have to run a bidding process or not. This also allows for us to have a town staff available, scheduled on off hours. Someone that can be there for weekends, for games, someone who has authority to write and cut checks to the umpires, as we were talking about the other concern. And there's still a process we're working out with the auditor where that first primary threshold of approval process, it doesn't tie me in as well. Right now, and I admit with everything else, the town manager is not as attentive to recreation committee needs as you guys need in order to keep your processes moving forward. And this is part of alleviating some of that stress and pressure and doing it in a cost-effective manner.
So I don't disagree with any of those points. It is difficult to see a $17,986 line item without any actual money to manage. So there are no funds being appropriated by the town.
We are managing the recreation committee funds. There's a lot of bookkeeping, there's a lot of journal entry, there's a lot of the checks and the management that we have to manage. And it's not a slight increase in work. That's the justification.
And then just I'm pointing out though, that's all predicated on the volunteers actually going out there and raising that money and being able to run those programs and accept registrations, right? Because I'm only pointing out that we do not get, in this particular budget, the recreation committee for basketball, softball, baseball, t-ball, softball, and for our spring sports, winter sports, and fall sports. We're not getting any money from the town to actually.
Does your operating budget require it? Does your operating budget sustain operations outside of what it is that
Over the
that we have
last
to
5
provide
years,
for
we've
back?
gotten to a place where we're able to. Currently, if we are able to administer everything, we do operate at a loss without sponsorships and without the request for donations. We operate at about $7,000 loss each year, based on registrations, because we have the lowest registrations in the area. So if you canvass Poland, Minot, Oxford, South Terrace, any of the communities that we play against, we actually are either at the lowest or tied for the lowest. So registrations don't always cover registration fees. So softball, for example, this year with the amount of equipment that we have to purchase, with the expected number of women that we will have in the program, we'll be operating softball at a $2,000 deficit. And that's including actually team sponsors at this point. So we do operate at a loss because registrations don't cover operations, and that's before we actually get to maintaining the facilities that we have. So we raise extra money to expand them. So I guess I just want to just show outlining that we have a budget for the council to approve and show that where we are at right now. We're not getting any money from the council.
So
Of services.
Are you saying, Zach, are you saying that if they want to buy 1,000 baseballs, they have to bid the baseballs out?
No, they have to use the purchasing. If they
Oh,
want,
they don't have
if they
to
want to
bid
buy $5,001 worth of baseballs, then yeah, they have to bid it out following the town purchasing procedure.
Okay, you have to bid it if it's over 5,000. Okay.
And the same thing, if within the town purchasing procedure that we follow for everything else, including the water department, is anything over that $5,000 threshold goes to the council for approval. Anything under the $5,000 threshold, manager or finance director has the ability, if it's within an approved budget, to authorize it. $250 or under, the smaller the ancillary purchases is traditionally a department head. With a committee, we don't have a department head, we don't have a town staff
Right.
on hand and able to provide the attention to the committee and its needs. So, as well as what we've been putting out for the town clerk, servicing that committee, traditionally operating as secretary and treasurer for that committee, totaling the hours of the past year alone was over 4,000 in staff hours, just doing the bookkeeping for the little bit that we were doing.
And if they do go over that $5,001 and they don't like the lowest bidder, can they give argument to who they want?
Oh, absolutely. Council's purchasing policy doesn't require lowest bidder. And also, there are ways not around the bidding process, but if it's a single service contract that you're already working with someone and they're coming to do regular, it's the same process as we've done with some of the other water department construction projects. Or if there's literally only one person selling what we need, we can't require 3 bids. There's 3 exceptions that allow us to opt out of the bidding process. But again, it's council is final authority. My signing authority is 5,000, and that's what I'll say.
So if they had $7,200 in their account, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Yeah, so the irony is that because we didn't spend money last
I
year
mean,
on stuff.
it's because they've done such a great job and got so much money. The town is gonna take over spending their money.
This is a,
I heard you about the
so
attorney
why
and,
are we asking the question again?
you know,
It also is because they needed our insurance, correct? They had to become part of the town under our insurance.
Still, what we do have in front of us is to get the establishment of the non-lapsing revenue fund approved. So we've been operating under precedent as a non-lapsing revenue fund.
Yeah, there are certain benefits to being on the town, there's no doubt, and I'm not denying any of those, and, you know, and then not saying that so 3 years ago or 4 years ago, when we came under the town, there were significant benefits to that, which is why we went forward to do that. Where we are today, and some of the ways in which we, you know, we're operating, they were brought forward by legal and your auditing process, you know, are going to make us change some of those operations. You know, and we understand that. And going forward, our operating as such, we can't go back. And so some of the concerns that are coming up are, you know, budgets that we've approved in the past, and, you know, being able to have monies allocated or you know, items purchased as a result of budgets that were approved under the previous process, and making sure that those stick and we move forward, versus having to come back to you and say, all right, 3 years ago, in the meeting minutes for, you know, for June, we approved the ability to adjust how we use the fields and taking that land over to, you know, increase that. Because we have been trying to raise the appropriate funds, hence the large volume in our account, and doing it in a way where we don't have to go to the townspeople and ask that, you know, those are reasons why those funds are allocated. Now, we do operate as a committee, so I have other members of the committee that are here, that if I missed anything, you know, or
so when the recreation committee puts a budget forward next week to the council, and it lists, I'm assuming they're gonna list baseballs and bats and clubs and whatever it is that they're gonna buy for the year, and we approve it, then that's a done deal. We approve the budget.
Yeah, and then that gives us the authority we need to
Yeah.
approve it.
Okay.
I would like to add money though, for here, giving out money. I mean, you know, I'd love to be part of that. So, you know, if there's an opportunity to add more money to the recreation budget in the town, I'm okay with that.
Yes, sir.
Jay Bryan, as we go through this whole process, and we're sitting here and we're talking about allocating these funds, all of these funds were raised, these are non-taxpayer funds that we're talking about. I don't know if everybody in this room knows that. But all the funds that we're talking about administering and doing all these things for are all non-taxpayer raised funds. So my great fear now, because just through this whole process over the last year, this has put a lot more burden of time on the people that are on the rec committee, just trying to preserve the rec committee to keep us going and to keep everybody intact and to keeping volunteers engaged, because they were seeing success in something they were involved in, so they were willing to get out there and do a little extra work. And now it's almost like we're just trying to maintain our existence. And through these monies that we've raised for certain things, we're gonna go through another process that's gonna take more time. Because I can tell you, in putting the budget together for this whole thing, I mean, I got a ton of time in it. Justin's got probably 10 times the amount of time in putting this budget together. And it's been a good exercise, because now we started looking at other towns and the costs that they have on their rec departments. We started taking what it would really cost the town to run the rec department that they have now, if it wasn't for the thousands and thousands of volunteer hours that are put in by the people in this community. And we have those numbers, so it was very interesting to see what level we got to, because it even exceeded where I thought we'd be. As we go down, I'm afraid that some of these volunteers are going to drop out. That's usually what happens when you start getting more involvement from somebody from a town perspective. And not to say it's bad, but it's just going to happen. And it's happened in Poland. He doesn't have the volunteerism that we have over here. And he does a great job. I'm afraid that as we go down through this process, there's not going to be any money to spend. I mean, we're putting a person in place that's going to do some things for the rec department, and then they're going to do some things for some of these other departments that are going to get created. And I'm not speaking negatively of it, but I'm just afraid that money's going to go away. I mean, what we have for money is, I mean, it's been raised. We've been very responsible in everything we've done. We haven't bought anything that we couldn't pay for. And I just think that enthusiasm, we're taking a chance of it going away unless we can keep this process really, really simple, so that when somebody volunteers to do something, they actually have a sense of accomplishment instead of get mudded down in doing a bunch of paperwork or trying to satisfy, satisfy, I don't want to say government entity, but satisfy a whole bunch of things like you're talking about.
It's a perfect example, and what we're really trying to do, to come back to the original value statement, that we appreciate what's been put on through the volunteers, and the burdens that we get to deal with on a daily basis as an entity, and the levels of checks and balances that we have to operate under. It's a pain. So what we're trying to do is provide the opportunity and to invest in offsetting and insulating the volunteers from that burden. So they don't get bogged down in the paperwork. They don't get bogged down in the stuff that takes them out of the direct service providing of coaching and building and growing independent sports programs or senior recreation programs, and allowing someone to take and shoulder that burden, that they can be the administrator side of it to make sure that we get done what needs to be done, and that we're not going to lose volunteers for that process. But it's the same concern that a lot of people are going through, even fire departments all over the place. You know, if you ever start pulling on full-time firefighters, you start to lose your volunteerism. It's this volunteer threshold that once people think that a government will step in and do a little bit, then everybody takes their hands off and says, well, someone else is going to take care of it now. And that's kind of the crap side of it. That's a tragedy, the commons approach to it, but that's something that all government entities have to operate under, and hope that we can keep the positivity and the functionality of the program moving forward to an extent that people will stay motivated and involved. I don't have a 100% answer for that. Nobody.
Well, I don't think you're going to have, it's all going to boil down to if the people that are volunteering believe in what the road you're going down, if they believe it's the values there. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the rec department is the only department within the town that is staffed by non-paid workers. Because none of us get a salary. None of us get paid, none of us get hourly, none of us get anything. Now, I don't think there's any other department in town that doesn't get paid when somebody goes out and does a service. And then to come in here and we're gonna put an administrator in there for, and you did last year, you put an administrator in, you didn't, but they put an administrator, a approved the funding for an administrator for it. That hasn't got used yet, but I mean, you put an administrator in and there's no money for him to administrate.
You've lost currently the operation that we had. And that's what we're trying to alleviate. And unfortunately, when it fell back to me, yeah, you can't get checks cut, you're not getting the attention you need to be able to get some of these things done. That's because we don't have anybody that's able to provide the services that we need to provide, so you guys continue your service. We're trying to provide someone who can do that. The clerk has been doing it in the past, and it's not cost effective, not at that pay rate, not with the other work that we do need to get done within the clerk's operation budget, per se.
So that's $4,000, right? You said that was $4,000 per hour?
Yeah. Do you want to continue this conversation?
No, I'm just, that,
So, my question is, where we have no budget appropriated by the town, is it possible to get, put something in there, if it's for a specific thing, to get it appropriated by town within this budget cycle that we're talking about right now? Because I mean, in the past, we've had $2,500. Now, the town does some other services for us, don't get me wrong, we realize that, we value it, and we totally understand that. But we also, none of us get paid for doing this either, so it would be nice to see a little bit of something else that went back in.
It would be within the power of these two bodies to add that.
Especially where we've operated pretty much through the entire last budget session without using any of that $15,000 that was appropriated. We've used none of it.
You've used none of the line item, but we have covered the expenses that were provided out of the clerk's budget and some of the other budgets, yes.
So how do we go about that process if we wanted to bring something specific forward to the budget committee and the
Make
town
an ask,
council?
and we have either tonight or at any of the future budget meetings we have coming forward.
Yes, you can do that, Jay.
Okay.
Yes. You can ask, but have a plan.
No, and I mean, we
You
don't
can
have.
ask for whatever you want, and then we'll have a discussion.
No, and coming in here, we don't have a plan, because we've never gone through the budget process.
I understand that,
from
but
the
I'm hoping going forward, after we get this whole thing done, that you guys can have plans. And so that everybody in this town knows what your plan is, and we can all move forward to that, whether it's raising money together or getting money from the town. I'm hoping we'll all work together to get our rec department to be something more than what we have now. I'm not saying it's bad now, because I think it's perfect. But we do have other people in this town that they want some things, and we need to provide those.
so there's two things. We absolutely have a plan for every dollar that we raise and spend.
You probably do, Justin,
Right.
but
So
not
if-
all of us know that.
No, it's never been asked for. And so.
Well,
Can
okay.
we,
So that-
I
so-
wanted to try and keep
So
the
the
department
plan,
heads to
the
5
plan
minutes
for
tonight.
the whatever
in
we
order-
bring for the town, we will absolutely bring that forward, and we'll have that for you.
I would love to hear it.
So, but I just want to make that there's a
Yeah.
distinction. Coming in here tonight, this is the first time we've been.
I understand that.
So that's.
I understand
that's what
that.
we're-
We haven't finished this whole rec thing, and I understand. I understand it's been a pain for you guys, very painful. I understand that. But it's something that I feel we need to do, and I think some of the others on the board feel the same way. And it's not to take away from what you guys do, and you do it very well. We need to get the financial part. We thought by adding this that we would help you so that you can stay out there on the field and do those things. It was only to be helpful, and it was taken very differently, and I'm sorry about that. But can we move on now?
If you want to jump, we'll be going over all these again too.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Next department is the Social Services and Welfare Department. So, a majority of this, the other services are offset by the DHHS reimbursement. What we pay out is the GA administrator. It's been a supposedly contracted service. The contracted service provider is on a medical leave of absence. in preservation of that position. We have the town clerk filling in for those responsibilities currently, and are not going to make the change to that program this year.
So just to make this clear, the town clerk will get a stipend for $4,500, correct? In addition
Yes.
to her regular salary and pay. And then the safety and health compliance, the town clerk will also do, but that pay, that $8,000 is going away, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And the portion of the reason for not modifying that process now is the person providing that service is on a leave of absence, and they were not treated as a contracted service provider. For insurance concerns through MMA, they were brought on as a town employee. There's still questions based on their leave status, ability to come back and ask, that we are not looking to make the changes that we initially hoped to make to that program. Assessors fees, the normal work that they do, working with our tax clerk, and that's a single contract fee that is going up this year. Questions? Auditor is the same process. Contingency funds is the same as last year. Not me, I said this before. Debt service, the only change to the debt service is the first interest payment on the new loan for the municipal building. It's an interest-only payment due next March. And that actually is being offset by utilization of the future debt service reserve fund that we're setting up. Pensions and insurance line. Changes within the pension and insurance. Benefit increase is based on changes to existing staff as well as new proposed staff. Portions of some of the new proposed staff that we've already talked about, and current ones coming up, there is an offsetting expense. They are increases, but there is offsetting expenses in regards to overtime that we have eliminated or dramatically reduced based on those services. And the other line item of interest is the COLA line. It is in at 2%. In indexing this to what we're looking at the 2018 purchase price inflation index of 2.44, it is still under. But that is still another line up to date. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns on
Has the number 6.5% always been 6.5% for the match? Or
the retirement match?
It's
Yes.
always been 6.5%?
As long as I've been here, 6.5%.
Okay.
Anything else? Animal control is a contracted person as well as our disposal. You don't take over the carpets?
Not required by the state to have an animal control officer.
We have to be contracted with somebody locally. Dispatch is different. What we've done, again, through allocated expenses, so don't take it out on the department heads, these are my calls. We've reallocated the dispatch service fees that we pay through county to the utilizing department. Police has their share, fire has their share, as well as they split the PSAT fee, which is our number. But that department goes away. Emergency management as well, that was $1,000 stipend position for the EMA director for the town. Relocated it into the combined fire rescue to eliminate small and erroneous, not erroneous, but insignificant line items.
Come on up, Fred.
fire and rescue. I know that this had been talked about before, but what we did do this year is compile fire and rescue into one. Operationally, they really operate under one department head with their chiefs. This allows us to be a little bit more, I think, intentional as well as less bureaucratic within the process of running it as two separate departments. Notable changes, addition of rescue, so the rescue line we'll get to later has been eliminated, those expenses have been incorporated. Some of the redundant expenses have been eliminated through that process. The EMA stipend has been positioned in here as well as their dispatch budgets. Minimum wage increase is also another hit that the fire department is taking, going from 11 to 12 an hour. As the minimum wage keeps climbing, that is going to be a noticeable impact. And then we have the admin hours that we were talking about, trying to find a way to provide opportunities and ways for us to keep up and excel at the required administration side that we need to have within the services that we are providing. And then we have their minor and major CIP. So I will turn it over to Chief and his deputy.
Well, like you said, we combined the budgets. Corinne actually wanted to do it last year, then he held off. So it was just to do it on, he said, we'll throw it on the new guy. They just rolled really good, because that's what we were gonna do it last year. So we held off. So Jen and I just get our budgets together, separately, then we just combined them. So I well, this doesn't look like a huge budget compared to what you separated it out. And like I said, EMA was thrown in there because the fire department's been doing it. I've been doing EMA, and whenever I got an assistant, one of my deputies is helping me out. So we got that in there. The regular supplies, descriptions and all that, as usual, you have your yearly descriptions, and they go up every year, no matter what you try. You'll see an increase this year. We asked for, it's not really in a separate line item, it's in contract services. We want to contract out, get our hose tested and have such hard time, get people to test holes in the spring, and also doing us save us on personal injury, having an outside somebody come in and just do the test. And all the fire's done it, I just talk around. And that's just one of the contracted services we've done. Utilities, I never seen them before in the past. It was always where you saw it under one budget. So trying to figure out what that old building uses. I give them credit trying what he sees there.
It's a lot of painful math involved in that process.
I know that heat and power, we go through a lot of light bulbs over there. We've had CMP look at it, and they said there's just too much power going in, but nothing to do. I don't know, right? Let the guy do his thing. Minus CIP, you'll see a couple items there. One of them is wastewater rescue suits we've been looking at, and what gave me the biggest idea was this winter. Well, first of all, you've seen everyone going after the dogs. Poland's had it. They got the big rescue boat sled over there. They actually lost, get some saves and stuff from the lakes. We got a river that likes to open up and close. We had last 2015, the year of my accident. You guys know about the big rescue. We had a Coast Guard chopper come in. That was in the spring, early summer. So the river is a hazard for us. We bought a boat, a little one to throw in. We've actually used it for rescue when people's boat was sinking above the dam. But I heard Jeff go out on I was in my pickup, and he went out for checking for kids on the river. And when we got there, I heard his radio transmission. They were okay. They were telling him there's 4, 5, 6 inches of ice out there. It wasn't 4 days later, I went right by over the bridge going to work, and she'd opened right back up to the center. We don't have anything, I'll tell you right now. If you can do an ice water rescue, I'd have to call Poland, Oxford, response time. The best we could do is run up, throw some, we got some rings, and hopefully they get strength enough to grab it. And sending a firefighter or anyone out on the street close with a rope is just insane. Anyways, they ain't gonna be any helpful with it. So that's what we were looking at. That's only 2 suits and some inflation, not really inflation, is like a big ring. And you can really spend up tons of money on this. This is just to get, we got a small river, so I don't think we need to go totally crazy. This is just to get started, have something that's right then and there, the truck rolls up, rescue rolls up, and they can throw something on, tie themselves off, with some proper training and get out there. And the other thing we've been asking for years, I mean, way back John and I just talked about it, we've always put it off. And it was after this last accident we had here, where the guy ran away and left his buddy pinned in the car. We had to call, we always put the call out to both units, Poland and Oxford, hoping one would get there ahead of whoever gets there first, you know. They both have really big, super big units there. I mean, Oxford's is set up so they can go to the racetrack. Poland's got the big rescues going on. And that's why we had mutual aid. But our truck's sitting there, it was at night, and it took a while, you know, volunteers from Oxford, they don't man the station at night. Poland does, but they don't really, they got their own procedures. They don't roll their rescue out 3 people, so they have to have wait for another person on their big rescue, make sure they have proper manpower. And so it takes a little while. I mean, as far as I know, the person made it. You can have TV and everything, but he was hurt. So this tool is nothing but a battery operated and a big motor. It's a small tool, fits in the compartment, and it's just mainly just to spread the door, pop a steering wheel. And the reason I wanted to go battery, I do see some farmers with old tractors out around here. We can grab it, run out in the field, throw some blocking underneath it. We can lift the tractor or I don't know about a skidder. I'm not getting a unit that big anyways. It's, you know, you can buy everything in the world and you never use it. And that's the only reason I was asking these 2 things. And like explain those are the minor CIP things I was looking at. And the duty officer, administrative position, we're just maintaining right now till the state comes in and likes to find fire departments. I don't know, it seems like the latest thing they do. Make sure we hit all the records. We're trying to play the game, make sure, but as you work, my job's got busier, everyone else's jobs got busier. It's hard to take time off, sit down here and like get out of the truck, especially as you get older, you just want to go home. And so the guys said, well, we'll take a day off and go there, well, you don't want to lose a day's pay. And so we just looked at $21.50 an hour. It just says we looked at, well, all of us who are in the administration side, take 1 day a week. And this isn't just for me. I mean, we would definitely here, or my other deputy, or Jen, come in, spend the day, and get stuff together, work on the computers, and not feel like you lost your day pay, you know what I mean? I mean, not complaining to all that much. I mean, I 3 days at the fire, at the big fire. That's part of the reason I jumped into this, I guess. But, you know, checkbook's kind of short at the end of the week for some of these younger guys, and it makes it harder for them. So that's why I went with that. I wanted to go to per diem guys, and per diem, we looked at the insurance cost, and I know you got that pennies, but you get per diem, but, so you can have, because it's times, we just ain't got no one, economy's good, we don't have volunteers around, they're working. And when you ain't got no one around, people say, why ain't you responding? So I'd like to see us combine with another town, see if we can give them like Greenwood or West Ferris, and then one town gets a person, the other's from. It's a way to get someone in here, start getting us up to snuff, make sure we're all on the thing. Days coming when you're gonna have to have some people in the station, that's just all it is. I'm telling you down the road here. It's not getting any better. I mean, you just look what you saw on the news tonight, another fire department up north is having problems, you know. I don't know all their problems, but you just listen and it's like, yeah, I can see some of it anyway.
I think up to snuff covers a lot of it. We got a lot of extra stresses from the mill fire. And operationally, and unfortunately it's an administrative thing, the amount of reporting paperwork on that side from an incident like that, from some of these other, even the EMS calls, the amount of follow-up work that is not the response time, that is not the in the moment doing what needs to be done, but coming in and doing all the paperwork and follow-up reports. It's the concern, and it's the level that if we're gonna do it, we have to do it well, and we have to do it to the state standards. Especially smaller fire departments, we're not getting away with the old paper processes and the level of reporting that we used to be able to get away with.
We've talked full-time chief, yeah, it'd be nice. I mean, all he does is a bunch of, a lot of towns do it. But that's another whole budget, another line item, you got pennies to go with that, expensive. And so just, you know, I want to keep my taxes down too. I've always been flexible with budget or anything when we go this, provide the services we got. So this is just an idea we're coming up with. You guys talk it over, and if you've got questions, give me a call, you know where I live. You see me around here anyway.
The only other thing that we are looking under fire, under the large CIP, general vehicle, part of the PSAC process is we're working on pulling out all of these individual line items, individual trucks, pieces of equipment, so we can itemize it, understand what our utilities are, and then what life expectancy, and also working on what growth, what direction makes sense. And we're working with these mutual aid processes when it comes to the combiner tool, the extraction tool. Does it make sense with us based on who has what in the area? Mutual aid is becoming much more equipment specific when it comes to the utilization of our ladder truck compared to the towns that don't. I mean, it's something that's going to get much more usage, and we're getting much more road mileage on it. We are requesting to put in the same CIP side for the vehicle reserve that we normally do as we work the next 12 months on the process of the assessment side of it, not trying to make a lot of changes to the CIP process. I know we did rate it this year when it came to the repeater breakdown. We're not increasing the addition, pulling out of that to offset the expenses that we had to pay to get that repeater back up and running, but we want to be able to spend the time this upcoming year to do the work and the research to figure out the actual investment process instead of just throwing more money at it now before we sit down and create the plan.
So how much is the amount you want to do for the CIP for the fire department?
CIP for fire is 95, so that's the 75 in general, regular, and then 20 for the air packs. You want to talk about the air pack?
Yeah, we're gonna have to replace them. They're just getting to the life expectancy. And we lucked out and we bought them. We did get a grant. We always applied. They're getting tighter. Fire systems grant. That's how we purchased all of them at once, which was a blessing in a way, but it also was kind of we bought them all at once. So they're all dying at once, not taking like, when we were buying in the beginning, before we got the grant, we were buying like 3 out of the year, buy another 2 the next year. So everything was staggered. And then we lucked out, we got the big grant, so we went for it, you know, and we got a Cascade. Well, now, when I just sent one out, it's over $400 to repair the heads-up display on the thing. Just tells you what, you look in the mask and it tells you which area you got, like red, green, yellow, like that. And like, I've had the guys check, make sure, as long as there's parts available right now, they'll repair them. But some of these manufacturers, that's why we ended up buying new gas meters a couple years ago. They just decided, meters are working fine, I just couldn't get any more sensors. They just eliminated it because they built such a good meter, right, where they realized no one was gonna buy new ones, so they just deadlined it, so can't get anything new on it, so. And we got 3 new ones for, you know, CO meters and measure the gas now, but that's what's gonna happen with the air packs. They're finally gonna say enough, we want no more parts available, so. And I didn't wanna have, what I saw what Oxford paid, and they got a lot more air packs than us, so the bill's gonna be a lot bigger anyways, but it scared me. It's not a cheap thing to do at all. I mean. What was it? Oh, it was way over 50, 60,000. No, it was close to 100. I'm looking at 50, 60, sorry.
To replace those air packs?
Yeah, they're over $5 grand a piece.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
They're over $5 grand a piece now.
So you haven't budgeted enough for repairs, is that right?
No, I got enough repairs. I mean, they're working. We test them every year because
state says we have to have them tested, we do, where you want them tested, it's well tested. As long as it parks, we'll make sure we're fine. It's just, I can see it coming, and this is why we try to run the plant. They're 2003s when we got them. We're going over 10 years on them, you know.
Being able to institute the CIP process, and yeah, I mean, the grants are great when we get that equipment for not having to have that outlay up front, but without starting the plan when we get them in 2003 and start putting away a little bit of money every year for repair, replacement, maintenance, we don't get hit with these surprises like we did with the repeater system. I mean, the system has been in for 25, 30 years, and we had nothing on hand to eventually repair it, and we know that wear and tear will happen. So this is really where the CIP process and running these 7-year projections and budget forecasts, I think, are going to be very useful for council and budget committee to be able to see and address where the value is going, and we can start better identifying the investments that we're making in the equipment without having to hit those surprises, the breakdowns, the putting up budgetary fires per se. Any questions, concerns, comments? Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Fred.
Jeff.
The bigger things, I mean, me hobbling them, when it comes to the police department's budget, allocated expenses again, and dispatching fees. Dispatching fees alone are for police dispatching, as well as their share of the 911 servicing, PSAP fees, is $25,000 alone just in dispatching. So when you're looking at the increase in the overall number, realize that 25 to 50 of that is my head. It's not anything that they're doing. You know what else you want me to?
Yeah, just, my major increase this year is, we put in the budget an extra patrolman. Over the years, we've needed this and needed it. Researching back through old records, back in the late 70s, early 80s, somebody within the town, whether it was the town council or the police department at the time, requested the Maine chiefs of police do a evaluation of the town and what it would be, what is the safe requirements or the best requirements to have a full-time police department. And back in the late 70s, early 80s, they recommended 6 full-time officers for a full-time police department. A lot of things that a lot of times people will just sit and they look at, well, 4 guys works out to your 42 hours a week, but it doesn't take into account anybody's vacation time, sick time, or when you send an officer off to training. My guys get very little specialized training because we can never afford to send them away because we always seem to be short-handed. We don't have the thing. Most of those specialized schools are a week to 3 weeks, depending on what you're sending them to, where they have to go away. They're not here for that period of time. And when you're operating on 4 or 5 guys, especially if you're waiting for a guy, I've got a guy in the academy, he's gone for 18 weeks. So that's 18 weeks you can't send anybody to school. This year it worked out. We were gonna have a guy in the academy from August through December and then from January through May. So that's an entire year where I really can't afford to send anybody away to anything. And kind of the second highest reason why you lose guys to other departments is because you don't send them to any specialized training. You don't give them any special skill set. They don't feel like they're growing in their job. The sergeant has put together a great presentation. He's done a lot of fact searching, but it's about a 20-minute presentation, and we didn't want to do that here tonight. We're hoping if you want to see it, if you're interested in it, we can probably do it at the next meeting for you. But that's the biggest thing, and that added money on for the extra position, but what it also helped was it cut my overtime hours. They were at 700. I cut them nearly in half. I didn't want to cut it more than that, just because if we are granted the position, I still gotta hire a guy and send him through the academy, so there's gonna be some overtime until I can get that person trained. But there was a sizable cut in the overtime hours in adding that position. There was a little extra because you have to outfit one other guy in uniform, so there was a little extra in the uniform line. But pretty much everything else either falls under the utilities that have been put over into my department that weren't there in the past, or most of it is increases on things like my tech support for the computers and stuff like that, that I don't have a control over. That's what they charge to handle the tech part of it.
Are you still working on the potential partial grant funding or
Yes.
training?
And if, one of the things we wanted to do with this is try to, again, some of you may remember back when we added another person quite a number of years ago, we was able to get, they called it a COPS grant, where the federal government, for the first year you hire the person, they pay 75% of the entire cost of that officer. Including, I believe, Lisa, didn't include benefits and everything else, it's the whole package. I'm pretty certain it does, it's not just the salary line, it's the whole, I believe it's the whole benefits package. The second year, they pay half, we have to pay half. The third year, we pay 75, they pay 25. And then a condition of the grant is the fourth year, you have to maintain that officer, and you pay 100% of the thing. So it breaks you into it slowly versus quickly. But I had to put the entire thing down here as a cost because currently, as well as if you've been watching the news at all, as our federal government's getting along, there was, in 2017, when they put out the grant, this COPS grant, there was a piece added into it about immigration, and then the two sides argued about it, and the Supreme Court got involved, and there still is no decision on whether that's unconstitutional or some sort of a stipulation in that. So that grant has been suspended, but it's like any day somebody could make a decision and they could open it back up.
What about your wages, Chief? Last year you bumped them up a little bit to try to be a little more competitive.
Yeah, we were at the very bottom rung, if not a little bit under the ground on the bottom rung.
Are you still keeping up?
Yeah, I mean, it's helped a lot, and as long as we continue to get some increases as we go through, I think we'll do okay.
We were able to pick up two really good guys.
Good.
Because of that, so definitely thank you guys for that.
Personal experience working through the county side of it for the previous couple of years, it is dog eat dog, and there's a lot of poaching out of police, sheriff's department, between towns, especially Lewis and Auburn, or the highway patrol. They are always recruiting, so when we see them, we lock the door and don't let other departments in to see our guys, but there's only so much we can do.
Just wanted to say, it's kind of unfortunate, but the town manager, Zach, and I did talk, and I understand his theory between spreading things out, but when you're trying to add a position and then you get all that other spread out, it makes for a huge jump in your line item, in your budget. But I do understand his theory behind it, and I was supportive of him for it, because I do get where he's coming from on trying to divvy out what you actually use.
I definitely appreciate that you can express that with less angst than we did last time we spoke.
I will say that the presentation that I have put together, I really hope you guys will take the time and allow me to show it to you, because it breaks down exactly why this is needed and crucial, and why it should be brought in at this point and not wait longer. Like I said, it's about a 20 to 25 minute presentation, and it breaks down numerous different aspects of why it is needed.
It goes back to our earlier conversation too, with the increase in businesses. I mean, we don't have, I want to say, the shoplifting problem that Auburn is dealing with now, with the amount that that's costing their police department. The more retail we have that comes, the more time we spend at Hannaford. In some of these larger retail operations, it does involve us more, even for shoplifting, for heavy things.
And the paperwork involved.
And all the paperwork. Today alone, what makes it harder for what we do is the follow-up, and part of providing that quality of life and resolution to the complaints and the concerns that people get. We don't get that from the 4 full-time officers that are on the road, they're 42 hours all week long. Part of that, there's no investigation because they can't leave town when they're on. They're not able to go out, follow up leads, do their investigations, or do the administrative side of it, or deal with Channel 13 today when they want an interview with our police chief based on the story that happened to be going on.
Yeah, and that's a great example that we went to, is today I come in, and of course, I've been on vacation. I had a few days off, so I come in expecting to kind of try and catch up on my chief's work. And we had a missing person which needed to be investigated. We gotta try and locate this person. And so while I'm trying, all the chief stuff got put aside, and I'm just more or less answering calls that come in through the day and just trying to work on this missing persons thing. And I'm getting calls from all the news stations. Some of them are coming to the window upstairs. And this day and age, you need to be more open with these people and do all that. But when you're the guy that's trying to work on the case, you can't talk to these people and give them their little tidbits that they need so that they can report the news, and they aren't gonna leave you alone. They keep coming, they keep calling, and every time you pick that phone up, you're stuck on the phone, and now you're not working on the case. Then you're working on the case, and then you get a call with just one guy on. Times have changed. It's a lot more difficult today than it used to be. And just the background stuff that isn't seen, the mandated training now, mandated policies that everybody has to be trained on. There's just so many more things. You know, we don't get any stipends. We don't do the stipend thing, but within the department, in the last few years, we're now mandated to have a domestic violence investigator, and ours is minimal compared to what a lot of other towns have, but you have to follow up every domestic violence call. You have to follow up on it, so somebody's got to do that. And you can't always rely on the guy that's the duty officer to do that, because we have days where guys go right out straight. They go from call to call to call. A lot of times I get fortunate, I don't necessarily go from call to call to call, but I've got a lot of paperwork that I have to try to get done that requires me to be sitting in the office, and you can't be going out and doing all this other stuff. You just get a little pieces of a lot of things done, but you feel like you never get anything totally done.
We could just end crime.
Yeah.
Any more constructive comments than mine? Thank you. Thank you all. I'm not allowed to say this out loud. Next is my favorite. Mike? So, my changes, within the conditions, we have, coming out of municipal line, municipal complex line, we are shifting janitorial to the janitor position supplies. We've been able to minimize what we brought over from the existing line, but are shifting janitorial over as we're looking at other buildings, other scenarios that we have, utilizing that position. And something I think integrating him more within a department that has the ability to provide him his extra services. They link so much, when we're going on the maintenance side of the building and that small interchange between going from janitor to public works side. Because right now, those departments kind of stop at the inside of the door versus the outside of the door when we're cleaning up after a snowstorm, shoveling steps, or sweeping sand. And as well as allocated expenses, which again, I apologize for.
You're the boss. I go along with that. The only other thing that went up on was operating supplies a little bit, and then you had the other line items with the CMP and the other stuff in the back. But I will tell you, it's been an astronomically very stressful winter, hard winter. A lot of breakdowns, almost every storm. We spent tons of money on equipment being broke. Sand pile we had to add to, which is already gone. Salt, we have no more money for salt. I have enough maybe for 2 more storms in the shed. When you get snow, when you get rain, and you get freezing rain, and you have to sand every time you go around, it's been really, really bad this year. One of the worst I've ever seen, so, and it's not over yet, but we try to keep it bare bones as much as we possibly can. Most of the time, we give money back every year. I don't see that happening this year, the way things are going, but it'll be tough. Tough on my men, tough on me. I fell down twice in the last 2 weeks. And I ripped my hamstring and still trying to work, and it's just been a rough winter.
The excavator you bought, that's been a good.
We
tool.
used
That's
that
paid.
5 times this winter,
Yeah.
emergencies that we needed to. Water line last week, when we got that rain, that 2 inches of rain, that you don't expect in the middle of February, water was running everywhere. Over on Sunnyside, we had major flooding running down the street. They come off the Perkins Rock up there, you wouldn't believe the water that comes down through there. Just those, all those culverts were froze right up because of all that rain we were getting, freezing rain. All the culverts, there was probably 2 feet ice in the culverts, so.
It's a pretty twisted scenario, and honestly, I think that water main break is probably something that exemplifies that a little bit more on what we're looking at. I mean, the age of some of the equipment that we've got in the ground, some of the, I don't really want to say publicly, I mean, some of our water lines are from the 1800s. I mean, they're aging. That's not me, Mr. French gets to deal with that. But having them on call in the middle of the night to pull out their backhoe, or their excavator and the backhoe to be able to dig that line at 3 in the morning.
Well, we had a long week that week.
They
We just got out of work, Stevie called me and said, I don't know, my guys are tired. When we're gonna go home, well, my guy said, sure. They were there at 1:30 in the morning, then it snowed the next day. So we had to work some more. I mean, those guys had no rest that week at all. I got hurt, so I couldn't work, but my 3 guys were there, so I'm lucky to have them around, I'll tell you. Brian went over there and helped them. No, they'd have been screwed. They're a really good crew, I'll tell you.
The only other thing not changing is the sand. At least currently, we're budgeting for the same sand amount we had this year, which this year is not enough.
It's just a weird year. Most of the times we have sand left over. This year's been terrible. I mean, I've never seen it like this.
We have very, very preliminarily started kicking around other ideas on town-owned property where we can find sand, and even where we're getting it now. I mean, a few years out, there's a life expectancy in mind, and I think with
Yep, we're only gonna be there so long. If we could find it on that piece of land up there, on the road, it'd be great. If you find it with sand, it'd be awesome.
we're gonna start pursuing other avenues, other options, but it's all kind of within the PSAC approach to taking the equipment side of it as well as some other resource side of it. Still, I mean, we even stand the same, 'cause who knows what next year's gonna look like when it comes to the amount of daily melt and nightly freezes that just, it seems ridiculous with clear skies to have to sand, but when you get that much flooding and it refreezes, they don't have a choice.
And, I mean, nothing's going down. I mean, equipment, you know, anybody that deals with equipment, big equipment, stuff is right up through the roof, starts past. And I mean, right through the roof. It goes up every year. It doesn't go down, never goes down. And we try, my guys do a lot of wrench twisting themselves. I'll tell you, they come out of there black some days. They bust their butts. And they say we spent a lot of money. Don't like that.
Questions, concerns, anecdotes? Thank you.
Scott. Thank you, Scott.
I'll need some rest. The other Scott?
Transfer station. Gonna be a welcome for some of you. Scott is the new transfer station manager. People who haven't been in the process. Les left us for Arizona. Apparently it doesn't snow in Arizona. Changes we're looking at for transfer station this year are all positive. We have removed and absorbed 1 position. There was another position in there, smaller set of hours, people logging 4 or 5 hours a week. We're really combining that and really, it's harder to manage people who work very little, I believe. So with no change, the only change that we are gonna get hit with is that minimum wage increase on the second half of the year. You can see that it's prorated for the second half of the year, starting after January. We are also working towards adding an additional day of operation at no expense. Minimal expense, $89 a month, get them internet up there. We're relocating the office up there, and that allows, instead of sitting here, as Les has been doing his paperwork and his reporting every Monday at an office in here, they will now have internet and moving their operation up there so they can sit there, do the paperwork, do his mandated DEP reporting in between customers, clients. I think the ability to add an extra day of transfer station being open without adding $1 to the budget, $89 a month for internet up there, I think was worth it. as well as in the past couple weeks alone, he's worked at looking at reducing our NWAC fees more. We are one of the few transfer stations out there, working with our group at AvCog, that we are not throwing our hands up and trying to figure out what we're gonna do with all our solid waste. People who have gone to single sort are screaming right now because it's cheaper to incinerate it at MWAC than it is to have someone pick it up. And they're shipping everything out, and some of them are talking about trying to tear single sort out. Because we didn't go to single sort, we're sorting enough, we're getting so much stuff alleviated from what we are having to pay to tip at MWAC and to incinerate. They'll take it for free, sometimes they'll take it for revenue for us, and they're finding ways to increase it when it comes to glass and other types of plastic, that if we can remove it from what we're paying to dispose, the goal is to save more, if not generate more revenue by selling it as commodity prices for some of these things are changing. Because we're not single sort, our trash is cleaner, and it's easier for us to sell when China stops buying the paper from Poland. They start buying pre-sorted paper, and that's honestly been working in my favor lately. And I guess the only other thing that we've worked on the changes is the requirement to assess and cap the landfills coming up this year. And we've arranged with Scotty to help with that as well, to be able to utilize Public Works to come up and help us cap the landfill. So I'm done talking for you. Say hi.
Hello. This is, as you guys probably know, I was just recently hired and a lot of stuff that, doing the budget, I just kind of looked back at the previous one and then met with Lisa so she could give me some tips on what we were at, where we were at in that current, go on that budget. And then met with Zach and came up with this, so if there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer.
Do we have anything on reserve account? My head's not working. Small input, 5,000 towards general equipment. So unfortunately, transfer station is not included in the PSAT committee when it comes to us listing it out, but we are working independently to have a lot of the assets and equipment that they're running be included in that process. So we're kind of fledging that out. It doesn't fall under public safety, so that's really why they're not included within that working committee. The same thought process is going to be utilized for them as well. Again, we've reached out to Public Works too to see if they're not overrun this spring, if they can help us with some resets, work on finding some efficiencies up there, and then look at some of the containers that we have. It's nothing we're looking to do in the short term, but getting some uniformity within our roll-off containers and trying to ease some of the process. Comparatively, we have a labor-intensive, being multi-sort, it's a little bit more labor-intensive than other towns have on single sort when you can stick someone in a booth to run the whole thing. We spend more time removing stuff. Scott's been working on plans already to, when we work at the relocation, that the less time we have to touch it, the better. And that's the goal. It's not to put people out of work, but it's to be more efficient with what we're doing and save money on labor when it comes to the amount of volume we're putting through there. And that's really gonna come in the future when we're trying to find that longer plan. Instead of having a hodgepodge of roll-offs that don't match, find something that's easier for people to self-service themselves on instead of what we're doing now, filling buckets and redumping type deals. And that's kind of what we've been working on in the past 2 months.
What day are you thinking of adding, Scott? Have you decided that yet?
Pressure's on.
I'm sorry?
The additional day, what day are you thinking of adding?
Well, in the short time that I've been there, I've had a lot of Mechanic Falls residents comment on the fact that they really miss Thursday. I have talked to Zach and the guys at the transfer station. I would also like to do something during the summer months, based on the way that the layout is right now, on the additional day, to maybe go into the early evening hours. I've talked to other transfer stations that offer that later hour, and a couple of them have said that that almost challenges a full weekend day on their evening hours.
How's the lighting up there
The lighting was good,
for evening?
yeah.
The other offset that we're still entertaining operationally is summer, winter hours, especially because the increase, we're not as drastic of a summer residential population increase, but it's still notable. Or people who actually take their trash regularly instead of putting it in the garage for a full month. So whether or not we can provide those later hours through the summer without, again, any change to the staffing line by doing it seasonally. So that's the goal. Good. Reserve accounts, we are flipping into the full CIP process. So the outstanding reserve balances you're gonna see represented in the CIP budget for the starting balances. It looks a little more drab on paper, but it's all auto-populated from these larger, major CIP spreadsheets, the 7-year forecast that we've gotten back. So as we talk through those, we've gone through most of all the department heads that actually have anything within their CIP budgets. County tax is the accurate number. They haven't released the bill yet, but that's what the bill's gonna be. $11,600. If you have a problem, take it up to your county commissioners.
Who is not you?
Finally, notes. The one in the book is off. The one that was in your packet when we got here has the new assumptions with the newer school figures on it. Again, valuation assumptions are the same based on what we're working on, a very conservative assumption with the assessor, knowing what we've had for construction, for real estate sales, and then again, pulling in the 3/4 of the $5.25 million on Hannaford. We're still not including all of the anticipated revenue increases and valuation increases that are out there. Homestead reimbursement, again, there's a lot of potential positives, but I'm not banking on any of it. County tax is solid. Education contribution is, the new sheet is that reduction from last year's figure plus $3,400. Revenue sharing, we took the very low end of that potential 0.5%. And then other revenues, again, is that excise tax that historically we've been able to hit, at least on excise. And that is going to put what I really wanted to include in this conversation, again, based on these assumptions and the way that the valuation and the way that the legislature decides to act, what we can anticipate. Our numbers going in, homestead staying the same, it is going to give us the ability to have this whole conversation in relation to overlay and or mill rate. Still anticipating that's the old one, $70,000-ish overlay, which is obviously higher than we would need and or consider. It would imply that we would be anticipating lowering the mill rate under this proposal. Questions, comments, hypotheticals? So thank you everybody for the overview. I will reach out, work with the budget, see if you guys want to convene next week. We can get to the business side of it. Council is set to convene the week after for their second presentation. If there are specific people that would want to call back, department heads or not, let me know.
I thought it was the talking the head series, so all the guys.
Yeah.